Okay. Good evening. This is Eileen Conroy, and I support the marketing function of Reform Elections Now. We're a nonpartisan organization dedicated to break partisan gridlock. Our speaker this evening is Peter Cyrus, who is a co-founder and a director of research of Reform Elections Now. Peter graduated with honors from Brandeis and received an MBA of distinction from Harvard Business School, where he continued his doctoral studies. This presentation, Our Election System is Broken, We Must Fix It Before It Is Too Late, is the first of a series that we're very excited about. There will be, currently there are 17 planned presentations that we plan to publish as a book and will be a source of material for many mediums, such as podcast. So with that, thank you for joining us. And I'm pleased to introduce Peter Cyrus. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks. We hope that the 17 presentations doesn't scare you off. Today is our introduction to these, and basically just trying to move this so it's not in everybody's way. I don't want to see myself. Our election system is broken, and we must fix it before it's too late. Now, wait a second, next slide. Okay. The political rhetoric is just reaching extremes. Donald Trump said, in reference to the Democrats, I hate them. I hate them because, well, whatever it is 1 second, because I really believe they hate our country. And Joe Biden said, Donald Trump is a genuine threat to this nation. He's a threat to our democracy. He's literally a threat to everything America stands for. Now, I mean, when I wake up in the morning and turn on MSNBC and Fox, all I see is people screaming at each other. They disagree on everything. There's only one thing on which all Americans can agree. 88% of Americans think our government is broken. Look at this slide from the New York Times Ipsos in January of this year. 9% of US adults, 10% of Democrats, and 9% of Republicans think the government is not broken. All the rest, 88%, think it's broken. That's pretty sad. Now, Americans are also dissatisfied with our country. Gallup asked, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the way things are going in the United States? In 1999, 71% were satisfied. In June of 2023, only 19% is satisfied, from 71% to 19%. And the percentage of adults who took great pride in being American has dropped from 87% in 2001 to 58% in June of this year. Again, pretty sad. Now, both parties have negative ratings. If you look at this, both the Republicans and the Democrats are underwater, according to a YouGov poll from May. Now, what's happened is the two parties have both become more extreme. If you look, the Democrats have become far more liberal and the Republicans have become far more conservative. Sorry, I'm trying to. Now, moderates, ironically, are the largest group, but they have no representation. 43% of Americans consider themselves independents. 34%, as you can see from the chart, consider themselves moderates. With 43% independents and 34% moderates, you would expect moderates would be well represented in government. Yet there are now 24 moderates in Congress compared to 160 in 1972, because the two parties have rigged the game to eliminate the middle. Now, this is a graph of the current Congress. There are a lot of people on the left. There are a lot of people on the right. There's not one dot in the middle. With the middle gone, bipartisanship has disappeared, and the two parties can't work together. Now, sorry. The more people have a moderate, if more people have a moderate political ideology and independents are the largest voting group, why are there no moderates? And why are our parties so polarized? And the answer is very simple. Our election system is broken. Our election system promotes the bases of each party against the middle. Incumbents run unopposed. Few election districts are competitive. Districts are gerrymandered to protect the party in control. Incumbents never lose. Primaries are rigged to support the bases of each party, and politicians are blackmailed by their party with the threat of being primaried. As a result, the two parties nominate and elect those who hew to their bases. Moderates are shut out, and most elections are meaningless. Now let's take a look at 2024. 70% of all elections in 2024 were uncontested. In state legislatures, it was 38.3. In 8 states, the percentage of contested state legislative elections was more than 50%. In 2, Wyoming and Massachusetts, it was 77 and 73%. Now, this is moving way back to Congress. But in 2024, Massachusetts had no Democratic congressional primaries. The Republicans only put up candidates in 2 out of 9 seats, and the average Democratic share of victory was 82.9 percentage points. Those are no elections. Now, even when elections are competitive, as we could see from, they're rarely contested, they're rarely competitive, as we could see from the Massachusetts numbers. 93% of state legislative elections were settled by margins of over 10%. 4 legislative bodies, if you can see from the chart, did not even have one competitive election. Can you imagine in a state with not, you're in Arkansas or you're in Indiana, you're voting for Senate, there's not one election that counts. The average margin of victory was 28.9 percentage points. 5 legislative bodies had margins of over 40 percentage points. Now, what does this mean? Well, Delaware has a 64.1 percentage points. That means that the average election was 82% for one candidate and 18% for the other. This is not an election. Now, incumbents rarely lose. Even when they're competitive elections, incumbents almost never lose. The incumbent win rate for federal and state legislative office is 97%, and seats are rarely flipped unless something specific occurs. So let's look at the 2024 congressional elections. 19 of 435 flipped parties. That's hardly a lot. But let's look at why. 10 of the 19 changed parties because there was gerrymandering, redistricting for the Voting Rights Act or for political reasons. 2 changed hands because the losing party ran a polarizing candidate in 2022, like Sarah Palin in Alaska. And 1 changed hands because Alyssa Slotkin ran for Senate in Maine. That left just 6 out of 435 seats that really had elections. Now, for Congress, the average margin of victory was 27.3 percentage points. These elections were settled by 1.5, and 2 of them by 187 and 653 votes. So the answer is simple. Unless it's one of these very few competitive districts, there ain't no election. Now, the lack of competitive districts is caused by self-selection and gerrymandering. Most elections are uncompetitive because like-minded people live together. You live in New York City, most of the people agree with you. However, the problem is made worse by gerrymandering because the parties carve up districts to protect incumbents and ensure the controlling party wins as many as possible. We fortunately have an experience with North Carolina that really shows what the difference is. In 2020, North Carolina's districts were drawn by politicians. The margins were almost 30%. In 2022, North Carolina adopted a nonpartisan system. The margins dropped to 20%. In 2024, the nonpartisan system was thrown out and they went back to a partisan system. The margins went back to 30%. In 2022, with a nonpartisan system, more than half the districts were settled by 15% or less. In 2024, only 3 of the 13 districts reached this level. With nonpartisan districts, both parties won 7 seats in Congress. With the Republican legislature drawing districts, Republicans won 10, Democrats won 4. That's how the game is played. But I want you to look at these really fine works of art below. These are pictures of congressional districts drawn by politicians. Now, the law says districts are supposed to be compact and contiguous. Look at these districts. I mean, it's possible the legislators were on drugs when they drew them, or they were trying to isolate their opponents. In Texas, I love Texas, the margins went from 27.4 to 43.6 percentage points, and the competitive districts went from 15 to 3. Now, this very day, Texas is having a special new redistricting so they can remove even more Democratic seats. Donald Trump said, I think we can reduce the number of Democratic seats in Texas by 5. The technical word for such a mid-cycle redistricting is chutzpah. That's a political word. But just so you don't think it's only Republicans, look at the districts the Democrats drew in Illinois. Illinois is on the top, Texas is on the bottom. The Democrats' share of vote dropped from 57 to 52.8. Yet with this artistic redistricting, they gained seats. Now, the best example I can give you is Wisconsin. In 2018, the Democrats won the popular vote with a margin of 53 to 44.8. That's a pretty big margin. That should have given them a comfortable majority. Instead, Republicans won 63 seats while Democrats won only 36. So you win by almost 9 percentage points, and you lose to almost two-thirds of the seats. How does that happen? Well, the Republicans who controlled the legislature packed the Democrats into a small number of districts. In 36 wins, Democrats only faced competition in 6. One was a landslide. So the Democrats' average margin of victory was 90.2%. The Republicans spread out their voters. Their margin of victory was 28%. It's real simple. If you win districts by 28% and your opponent wins districts by, it says 80, it should have said 90, it's easy to win the popular vote and lose almost two-thirds of the seats. Now, final elections don't count because people tend to live with like-minded people. However, as we've noted, the situation is made worse because elections are uncontested, incumbents don't lose, political parties use gerrymandering to limit competition and increase the certainty that the dominant party will win. This means almost everybody's vote doesn't count. In 2024, remember, Texas is now redistricting. Out of 38 congressional seats, only 2 were competitive. In North Carolina, only 1 was competitive. Remember, 2022, 7 were competitive. So big change. Now, if final elections are bad, primaries can even be worse. Of the only 16.9% of all primaries were contested. And of all with 4 states having top 2 legislative primaries, the number in regular states was about 15%. Of the incumbents who filed for re-election, 23.8 faced contested primaries, and a lot of those were because of redistricting. In state legislative elections, 3.5% of incumbents were defeated in primaries. Many lost because of gerrymandering, and many Republicans that lost were rhinos. Now, the first problem with primaries is turnout can be very low. In 2022, turnout was 21.3%. 2014, it was 14.3%. And some states had very high turnout, but some states had very low turnout. Look at New York, Virginia, Connecticut as 3 examples. In the past 5 off-year elections, New York has had an average primary turnout of 2.9%. That's ridiculous. Now, one of the reasons that turnout is so low is that parties bar or set up other barriers to make it difficult for independents to vote. 13 states with 56.5 million voters have closed primaries. Now, look at these numbers. Oregon and Connecticut, which have closed primaries, 41.6% of all voters are independents. They're the biggest voting group. They can't help in the selection of candidates. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I'll get right back to where I was. There. Now, not only do very few people vote in primaries, but those who vote are not reflective of the electorate. In semi-closed closed primaries and semi-closed primaries, independents obviously vote in much lower numbers. In closed primaries, they don't vote at all. As a result, primary voters tend to be much more partisan than the electorate. The next numbers are very striking to me. For the electorate as a whole, Democrats are 33%, Republicans 29%, and unaffiliated 29%. And there's some third-party people. Yet in primaries, Democrats account for 43, Republicans account for 46, and unaffiliates account for 10%. So, in other words, you're taking a third of the electorate and basically excluding them. Now, as a result, both parties tend to nominate those candidates that hew to their bases. Since the primaries are often the only meaningful election, this means the winner will be the one who represents the base of the party. Now, another step to make primaries more radical is that the parties polarize with threats of primary. In June, Senator Tom Tillis voted against Trump's big, beautiful bill. What did Trump do? He immediately responded by saying, Tom Tillis is making a big mistake for America and the wonderful people of North Carolina. I'm going to go out and look at Tillis's primary opponents and figure which one to support. Right after that, Tillis announced he would not run for reelection. In 2021, when some Republicans were contemplating approving the Electoral College election of Joe Biden, Trump stated he would, quote, primary the hell out of the ones who did not object to the Electoral College. You don't want to be a Republican with Donald Trump running around looking to find you an opponent. And several of the most moderate senators, like Kirsten Sinema, who ranked number 4 on the most nonpartisan list by the Lugar Center, declined to run for re-election because she knew she couldn't win a primary against Ruben Gallego. A second problem with primaries is primaries have very low turnout and often produce winners with less than 50% of the vote. Look at some of these numbers. Susan Collins, who's now a senator, won the Republican nomination for governor of Maine with 21.3%. Amish Shah won the nomination for Arizona Congressional District 1 with 23.5. These are other examples, 25.3, 34.3. My favorite one is the one at the bottom. Rashida Tlaib, who's a member of the squad, entered 2 primaries on the same day for the same job. John Conyers had retired, and there was going to be 35 days left in his term, plus a new term. So Tlaib ran for both. She lost for the 35 days, but she won for the 2 years. Why did she win for the 2 years? Because there were 2 additional candidates that didn't want to serve the 35 days, but did want to serve the 2 years, and they divided up the black vote. And she won with 31.2%. Now, there's a problem with this. The winners of these primaries can often be the losers. Let's take 2 because they are the more extreme candidates. Let's look at 2 examples. In 2022, Dr. Mehmet Oz, won the Senate primary in Pennsylvania by 950 votes over Dave McCormick. He got 31.2% of the vote. If independents had been able to vote, McCormick would have won. 900, there's 1 million independents in Pennsylvania, and they weren't going to vote for Dr. Oz. But what happened was Dr. Oz lost a close final election to John Fetterman, which McCormick could have won. And in 2018, Andrew Gillum, who was a progressive, defeated 3 moderate candidates in Florida's gubernatorial primary with 34.3% of the vote. Once again, closed primary states. Had independents been allowed to vote, Congresswoman Gwen Graham would have won. Gillum lost the final election to Ron DeSantis by 32,000 votes. Had Graham won the primary, she would have won the final election. Now, what do we do about these candidates that are nominated with 25 or 30% of the vote and that lose the final election because they are more extreme? Well, one alternative is some states have runoffs, pitting the top two vote getters against each other. In other words, in the case of Oz and McCormick, you would have had a runoff with just those two candidates. Runoffs sound like a very good idea, but they have two problems: turnout and partisanship. Turnout in these runoffs can be very low. In 2024, Texas had 8 runoffs in congressional primaries. The average turnout in the runoffs was 2.1%. 3 runoffs had a 1% turnout, one had a 0.4% turnout, and one had a 0.16% turnout. In District 29, there were 783 votes in the Republican runoff. The winner got 421 votes in a district with 750,000 people. And runoffs increase partisanship because moderate voters stay away. Party voters show up. So the moderate candidate that could have led in the first round is usually defeated in the runoff. Now, another reason for the lack of bipartisanship and moderation is that the US has the oldest and most tenured legislature in the world. The founding fathers, excluding Ben Franklin, averaged 31 years old in 1776. Now the average age in the Senate is 64. Now, before some of you come and start telling me, yeah, but the founding fathers died young, most of them lived into their mid 80s. Adams died when he was 85. Jefferson and Adams died the same day, July 4th, 1826, 50 years to the day after the founding of the Republic. But we not only have the oldest legislature, we also have the biggest difference in age between the legislators and the people. In France, the average age difference between the legislators and the average citizen is 5.2 years. In the United States, it's 22 years. Our representatives serve longer terms. 10 members of Congress have served for over 40 years. That's a long time for anybody to be in one job. If anybody's been in one job for over 40 years, please send me an email. Now, my favorite example is the Dingell family, John Sr., John Jr., and Debbie. They've represented the same district in Michigan for the last 91 years. And John Dingell Jr. served in his seat for 59 years. Sort of takes the edge off wanting to vote in that election. We also have the oldest Supreme Court in the world. Besides the United States, there's only one other country, Aruba, who does not have age or term limits for the Supreme Court. Now, what's interesting is 87% of Americans support term limits and 79% support age limits for Congress. But the old and powerful party leaders, happy 90th birthday, Chuck Grassley, like things the way they are. Now, there's a reverse problem. And whether it's age and the tenure of candidates or the polarization of the two parties, we have a unique problem with younger people who do not vote. In 2022, 69% of Americans were registered to vote. Among Americans 65 to 74, it was about 78%. But only 49% of those in the youngest 18 to 24 cohort were registered. A little more than half of all Americans voted. In the older cohort, 65 to 74, it was 68%. Among the younger cohort, it was 27%. And it's even worse for young men, where only 23% voted. Whether it's age, tenure, or polarization, our election system is in trouble if younger voters do not register and do not vote. Now, besides this problem of age and lack of competition, the problem is being made worse because money is gushing into the system. Just look at this chart. Look at the numbers in 1998. Total cost of the election, 3.1 million. We'll look at 2022 because that's, um, or we can look at 2024, 15 million. I mean, the fact of the matter is in 2020, it was even higher, but money is just flooding in to both congressional elections and presidential elections.
That's
And
$1 billion, right?
those, yeah, sorry, billions, sorry, not millions. Um, Now, one of the problems is that dark money goes to incumbents. In Senate races, the average incumbent raised 31 million. The average challenger, 2.7 million. Not competitive. Political action committees for business and labor gave 300 million to incumbents and 9.6 million to challengers. Now, business PACs aren't stupid. They know the system is rigged to incumbents, so incumbents rarely lose. Showering them with donations is a smart business move. Interestingly, most money now comes from outside of a senator's state or Republican district. And almost all who relied on money from within their state or district lost. As I said, in this election in 2024, dark money spent 1.4 billion on the election. Now, individual donations have also expanded dramatically, but the highest percentage of this money goes to the more extreme candidates. And ironically, and here is, I'm going to put a red flag up right now. Of all the people spending money in elections, the only ones who have not materially increased their spending have been political parties because they've been limited by the Fair Election Commission. There's only one problem. The Supreme Court has just taken up a challenge to that. And looking at what the Supreme Court decided in Citizens United, what we are likely to see is them overturning this and political parties suddenly gushing money. Now, it's not just money. Americans don't trust their government, but they also don't trust their newspapers and television news. If you look at the chart here, they trust small business, military, the police. They don't trust Congress, television news, or newspapers. So I was researching what is the most respected, most trusted media in the country? The Weather Channel. That makes sense. But if Americans don't trust our news and newspapers, how are we going to understand? Who's going to tell us about the problems of the government? Now, Americans also don't trust our election system. Look at this chart on the right. The Gallup asked people, do you have confidence in the honesty of the elections? Under the no, we beat only Chile and Mexico. Under yes, we came in tied with Lithuania for 27. And this poll was taken in 2019 before the problems of the 2020 election. If there was a more recent poll, which I haven't been able to find, the results would be worse. Now, in terms of how elections are run and trusting them, our voter registration is a mess. We have the lowest voter registration of any developed countries. States don't know when a person dies or moves to another state. If some of you own homes in more than one state, don't worry, you can vote in both and nobody's ever going to find out. In 2022, 19,260,000 voters were removed from the voter rolls. 4.8 million of these were removed because they didn't send back a confirmation notice. What happened to these people when they went in to vote? Oh, you're not on the registration list. You didn't send back a notice. To show you how bad these notices are, in 2 election cycles, Michigan sent notices to 4.3 million voters and received 183 valid confirmations. New Jersey sent notices to 2 million voters and received zero, no confirmations. That's how we get the mess we have. In addition, 4 million people have been removed from the voting list because they have felony convictions. And some, this is one of my favorites, Native Americans can't register because they lack a street address. Since most reservations don't have street addresses, somebody lives 3 houses on the left past the first mesa, just over the bridge. But since there's no street address, a lot of these people can't register. Now, in addition to the registration process, the voting process is a mess. Election day voting can have long lines. In 2024, the wait time at Lehigh University and in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was over 6 hours. If someone was wrongly deregistered or went to the wrong voting place, chances are the mistake would not be corrected. Some rural voters have to travel hundreds of miles to find a polling place. In Arizona, members of the Kaibab tribe had to drive 560 miles on back roads to vote. And many states use outdated voting machines subject to breakdowns that can disrupt the voting process. In 2016, in 10 states, all machines were more than decades old. In 2024, in one county in Pennsylvania, all the ballot scanners broke, causing huge delays. Now, using a more than 10-year-old voting machine is like using a Radio Shack computer or a BlackBerry. There are going to be problems. Now, mail-in voting is easy and has a significantly positive impact on turnout. It's a good system. Only one problem, it's controversial. In 2020, Trump posted on Twitter, "No way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent." Mail-in voting has some problems. Many votes are rejected for questionable signatures and other issues. The for the for example, in Franken versus Coleman Senate election, 225 mail-in votes were the margin of victory. In most states, voters cannot correct errors and hence lose their vote. Many believe there's fraud in the process, and there have been claims of dead people voting and mass harvesting of ballots from China and other countries. None of this has been proven. And the most common fraud is clerical errors. The problem is, as long as we have a system that people do not trust, we have a problem. Fortunately, fixing these things is very easy. Now, Americans don't trust the elections. They don't trust the counting of votes. We were ranked 26th out of 27 developed nations in trust of vote counting. 75% of Republicans, 51% of independents, and 30% of Democrats agreed that it was somewhat or very likely that cheating affected the outcome of the 2020 election. Also, Democrats thought they were robbed in 2000 and in 2004. Republicans thought they were robbed by ballot stuffing in Illinois and Texas in 1960. If we don't trust the counting of votes, we can't trust the results, and our election system is doomed. Now, as everybody knows, voting machines rig elections for sure. I mean, after the 2020 election, we could read a tweet by Donald Trump where he said, Dominion deleted 2.7 million votes nationwide. Pennsylvania votes switched from Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion system switched 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden. Now, the problem is, even if you think these claims are false, there are a whole lot of errors in our voting machines. I'll give you two really stupid, simple examples. In Fayette County, Georgia, somebody forgot to put the memory card in the voting machine, and 2,755 votes were not counted. And Trump got a majority of those in a state that was very close. In Antrim, Michigan, a new candidate was added for village trustee. So when they added the new candidate, the clerk should have updated the counting machines. But because she did not, votes dropped into the wrong column, shifting 2,000 Trump votes to Biden. Now, there are lots of examples like this, but the problem is you don't need a lot of these things to create a lot of uncertainties about stolen votes. Now, one more problem is the way votes get reported. On the right, you see a chart of Pennsylvania in 2020. When we went to sleep, or when most of us went to sleep, on Tuesday night, election night in Pennsylvania in 2020, Trump had a 700,000 vote lead. And as you can see from the chart, at 4:45 on Wednesday, with still a lead of about 400,000 votes, Trump declared victory. There's only one problem. He lost. But the same pattern occurred in Georgia and Wisconsin. Because states count election day votes first, urban votes last, mail-in votes last, cities and people who vote by mail were counted last, and all of a sudden, Biden, who was trailing by huge margins, 700,000 is a lot of votes, comes out of nowhere and wins. And that's how you get these conspiracy theories. We can't have continuing conspiracy theories. Now, one more question, and then I'll stop soon. You'll all be happy to know. When public corporations report financial results, there's an audit that follows following GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Principles. I'm going to ask you all a question. When we see states and municipality report voting results, does anybody have any idea what audits they use? Do you have confidence in a company called Cyber Ninjas that was hired to audit the votes in Arizona? Is there a paper trail for votes? How many votes have been checked? What are the sample sizes? Did anybody audit ballot management? How do we know poll workers are not stuffing the machines? Has anyone checked the handling of mail-in ballots that have been rejected? Does anyone know if the machines work or if they assign votes to the wrong candidates? What do each of you know about the election audit process? I bet very little. We trust financial results from major corporations because we can read detailed audit. We distrust voting results from Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia and other states because we have no clue as to what the audits are or how they work. Shouldn't we have detailed audit standards for our election? Now, I just want to sum up what we've said. 88% of Americans think government is broken. Satisfaction in the United States has dropped from 79% in 1999 to 2023. Pride being an American dropped from 87 to 58%. Both of our political parties have negative ratings. Both have moved to the extreme, Republicans to the right, Democrats to the left. Moderates are the largest group, but there are no moderates in government. 70% of elections are uncontested. 93% are uncompetitive. 4 legislative bodies did not even have one competitive election, and 97% of incumbents win. Gerrymandering makes the problem worse. Most elections are landslides, and the party with the most votes sometimes has the least number of seats. While few final elections count, primaries can be worse. Very few are contested. Turnout can be extremely low. They are much more partisan because independents are barred or discouraged from participating. Primary leaders co-opt politicians to toe the line by threats of primaries. And in some primaries, the winner, often the most extreme of the candidates, receives less than 25% of the vote, and then often goes on to lose the final election. In runoffs, things can be worse. As noted earlier, in one district of 750,000 people, the primary winner got all of 421 votes. And our representatives are getting older and more tenured. We have the oldest government in the world, and if you live in Dearborn, Michigan, and are 111 years old, the only candidate you ever voted for was named Dingle. Younger voters are turned off. They only 27% voted in 2022. Money is gushing, tripling since 1998. Dark money goes to incumbents, another reason why they win. Trust in media has plunged. People don't believe what they see, hear, or read. Americans don't trust our election system. It ranks at the bottom of developed countries. Our registration system is broken. Our voting process is a mess. Half of Americans don't trust the counting of votes. Voting machines and technology are ancient, leading to breakdowns, errors, and conspiracy theories. The way election results are reported fans the flames of fraud, and our election system does not have audit practices that people can understand and accept. Now, despite all these problems, which I've depressed you with, we believe there are easy solutions to all these issues. We believe election competitiveness can be increased and polarization reduced. We believe gerrymandering can be fixed. The primary system can become more competitive with much higher turnout. There are easy solutions to elections where the winner doesn't get 50%. New election systems can limit polarization and increase competition. There are ways for our government to get younger and less tenured. Election spending can be controlled. Our registration, voting, and auditing systems need to be fixed so more people participate and trust the results. There are simple steps Republicans, Democrats, and independents can take to quickly improve our system. Now, over the past 7 years, our team at Reform Elections Now has studied our election system. As Eileen noted earlier, we're putting our findings into a book, and we're planning 17 presentations over the next year. Now, this may sound like a lot of presentations, but we believe the risk to our country and our democracy is great. And if people don't stand up now to change the system, our problems are going to get a lot worse. Thank you.
You're doing God's work, Peter. Keep it up.
Okay.
Peter, you're doing God's work. Keep
Thank
it
you.
up.
I'm turning Eileen.
So yes, I was going to manage the chat. There was from, if it's pronounced Hamid, would you like to ask your question yourself? Or would you like me to frame it to Peter?
Either way, thank you.
Okay. Hamid's question was, have there been surveys asking young people why most of them don't vote?
Yes, that's going to be in the section, why young people don't vote. Somebody, no. And the answer is actually very simple. First, it's in a lot of states, it's complicated to register. And these are young citizens. We are not talking about, the illegal people ICE is rounding up. It's difficult to register. A lot of the young people say they don't relate to the candidates. And a lot of young people say, why should I bother to vote in an election where you already know the answer? Those are the three biggest reasons.
And Hamid had an interesting comment, not necessarily a question, about suggesting that we differentiate between liberalism and progressivism. Francis Fukuyama's book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, is a good source to see why.
Okay. I'll add that to the research list.
Peter, you need finances to keep this thing going and trying to reach out for studies and reach out to these young people. What kind of effort can we do to get more financial support so that this work can continue?
Well, I mean, we are established as a 501c3 now, and we do accept donations. But I will say we never have. In other words, we never have gotten a donation from anybody outside of our core team. And the answer is we did this for a reason. I mean, and the reason we did this is that we think there's a problem and we want people to understand there's a problem and we don't want them to think that we're out there looking for money. We want
Where
them.
do you take your results? Clearly, you have some good ideas about what must be done. How do we create action? How do you convert your results of your analyses into effective action throughout
And
the
the
country?
answer is we have a plan, but that let's save that for another meeting.
Okay.
We have a plan as we're doing the book, we're planning some podcasts, we're planning some publicity, and we have a whole series of actions.
Can you give me a sense of timeline?
Can I interject something here, perhaps that might be helpful?
Mhm.
Because we started this maybe, I guess it's close to 7 or 8 years ago, largely when we recognized that there was a problem that people weren't really noticing or understanding very well. And we were hearing it from an academic point of view, particularly from Michael Porter at Harvard. And we kind of had our eureka moment and said, hey, we really have to take this seriously and do something about it. We have done some things about it. We've done it with great effect in 2022 when we mobilized, I think, a significant movement underground, perhaps, but with academic support to ensure that the what was called the Electoral Count Reform Act, which fixed a couple of very bad 19th century laws, was written by people who were really competent to write legislation, namely 2 or 3 of our most prominent election scholars in the country, mainly one from NYU, one from Stanford, one from Ohio State, just accidentally covering the 2 coasts in the middle of the country, but in effect, really picking the people who understood what was wrong with some of the laws that existed and how to fix them. I think we do reach a very influential community, sometimes not just through the meetings, but through side discussions, and both with politicians as well as with academics. But we're more interested in being effective than being famous or numerous. And we've also we don't have a huge need for a budget. We don't believe that we're going to gain a great deal from bringing in consultants. We have, particularly through Peter, a tremendously powerful ability to find the research that's necessary. And frankly, we're often in wonder at how much he is able to get done with very little resource. But it's yes, we can certainly accept donations. And I think we probably will welcome them to make sure we keep going. But I think it's a leverage that we think is enormous through a relatively small number of people. And I think the book that we're talking about, I hope, will be something of a blueprint, not just for a few years, but for a decade or so, because progressive work or changes of any kind, business transformation as well as political transformation, it does take time. And frankly, we're doing most of this for our grandchildren, not for ourselves. I hope that helps answer your question.
And then from John German was the question, what about mobile voting?
It's interesting. John, by mobile voting, do you mean trucks running around with voting machines? Is John still on?
Thanks. There's a mobile voting project,
Yeah.
which is extremely well documented, and which makes it quite clear. It's talking about voting from mobile phones, with what they're billing as flawless security. I'm watching carefully, and I'm wondering how you're watching it. Thank you.
And it's really an intriguing idea. And as you will see when we get to it, we have a whole chapter on new voting technology. And I do believe that we will get there. But I want to just mention one thing that struck me, because it sometimes you do research and you get surprised. In primaries, the biggest correlation with increased turnout and satisfaction with elections, there are a bunch of states that allow vote from home, all email primary elections. And the increase in turnout in the states that let people vote by mail is, it's not voting on the mobile phone, but the increase in allowing people voting by mail is really significant. It's an interesting piece.
Just other comments in the chat are terrific, and look forward to the other 16 or
How about if
maybe
anybody has
17.
any live questions?
What do you? Okay, let's get in there.
Actually, I got a question. I don't know if Lucy's still on the call, but maybe Eileen can check with her. I believe she is the treasurer of our organization. If there are people who would like to contribute, We do have a mailing address where you could send a check. I don't think we're not at the level of getting credit cards and all that sort of thing. We are a 501c3. And anyone that wants to contact either Peter, myself, or Eileen, we can certainly get you the right address to send a check to.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we always share the recording, and so it will be shared with all of you, and thank you always for your interest, and we can share that information as well.
And thank you, Peter, for staying
Well,
within the time frame, which is often a challenge.
well, no,
We-
this one was much longer than the normal one, and I promise everybody that the next presentations will all be much shorter. And the reason this one was longer is I really wanted to detail all of the problems with the election system in one coherent presentation. The more I look at all of these problems, the more, and this is not about Trump or about Biden or about, the Jeffrey Epstein file. Um, this is about a political system that's broken. And I really wanted not to shortcut any pieces of it as a tee up for the rest.
Mhm. Well,
Does
Eileen,
anybody,
want to give a final conclusion to
well,
the
let's just ask if anybody else has questions. Just
what's the timeline for the book?
as soon as I can get it done. I mean, and I finish writing it. I send it to my team. My team all gives me their inputs. I get new inputs every day, and um, the uh, like it's interesting things that you see today. I got an. Oh, I'm still sharing this, so I'll go back. But today I got an input, and I looked at the 2024 election for districts that had flipped. It was fascinating because 19 districts out of 435 had flipped. That doesn't sound like a lot. But when I took a look at it, 3 districts flipped because the Supreme Court redrew them, saying they didn't fit with the Voting Rights Act. 4 districts, including 3 in North Carolina, flipped because they were gerrymandering. 3 districts in New York flipped for the same reason. One district in Alaska flipped because Sarah Palin had run 2 years ago and killed it for the Republicans. One district in Michigan flipped because Alyssa Slotkin ran for Senate. What was interesting was there were really only 4 districts that flipped for competitive reasons. 6, I'm sorry. And they had an average of 1.5% margins, with one having 157 vote margin and the second one with a 600 vote margin. And what you realize is that with the exception of 10 districts, there's no elections. And the other thing that I found today in my research, this is what makes it last longer, is remember I showed the slide about moderates going away. In moderates are being defeated or retiring from the House at twice the rate of everybody else. And so I looked at the Senate, and I went back and took the 2021 Senate numbers. 5 of the 7 most moderate senators are gone, and only 1 of the 10 least moderate senators are gone. So what that says is the system is not only are there very few moderates left, but the system is one by one destroying them. So the answer is stop giving me information, team, and we'll get the book out sooner.
Peter, it's Ken. Can you hear me? I was
Yes.
late signing on today. I had another meeting. I just want to say, if you're able to do God's work at your age, which I think is fantastic, I think there's still hope that you can develop a proper golf swing.
That's good.
Don't give up. In
But
spite of everything.
can I develop a proper tennis swing as well? I mean,
why not?
Eileen has challenged me to a match, and I don't know if I could, I got to work on my serve before I can take her on.
Go
Oh,
for
that's
it.
funny. I was thinking of taking up golf too, but I need to master tennis. So I want to thank everybody. I'll stop the recording, and we look forward to seeing you all. And we'll be sending out this recording.
TT.
Thank you all.